This is an interesting story that Neville tells in one of his lectures about a woman who basically, somebody she knows the wife of a guy who's panicking because they've announced massive layoffs at the steel plant, the company where he works. It was during some kind of a recession, and then there were rumors that they might close the entire plant. And the guy only had like a few years to go for his retirement, and I imagine pension and stuff. And that they just laid off 4,000 workers. And it was driving him crazy. The emptiness of the plant, the echoing when, they laid off 4,000 workers. The place was empty. And so anyway, it's an interesting story of how this woman used her imagination on behalf of someone else to save the day. But of course, when these good things happen, people, as Neville says, go right back to sleep and just say, well, it would have happened anyway. It's kind of hilarious in a way.
A friend of mine who was here tonight, she thought that she had failed this past November in her visit to Pittsburgh. Friends of hers that she knew well, and they were a little bit down because of the seeming recession. One friend had worked for 27 years at Jones and Laughlin, one of the great big steel firms of our country. In the months of September and October, they let out 4,000 workers. He had to put in 3 years and 2 months to complete a 30-year service with the firm. After 30 years, he could retire at a very good, I would say, retirement fund. But he also had 6 more years to go for his Social Security. And they let out 4,000. And then it was rumored in the plant that they're going to close that plant. She reminded him of the use of imagination, which he had used with him successfully in her previous visit to Pittsburgh. Well, he laughed it off. Those things would have happened anyway. She reminded him of 6 distinct requests on his part that he thought he could not realize. Every one came to pass, as she reminded him. And then she took a vision of mine and explained it to him. She said, you know what I told you the last time? That Neville had a vision. Well, the Bible tells us that the depths of our own being speaks to us through the medium of dreams and vision. So here in this dream of mine, call it a dream if you will, it was just as real as this, I was taken in spirit into an enormous mansion. And here 3 generations were present, but one was invisible, and that was the grandfather. The father was explaining to his children the secret of his own father's success. So there was the grandfather now departed from the world, leaving behind him an enormous fortune for the benefit of his son and then his grandchildren. And so the father said to the children, grandfather used to say, while standing on an empty lot, I remember when this was an empty lot. Then he would paint a word picture so vividly of what he intended to do with that empty lot, that it ceased to be an empty lot, and you saw the structure that he intended to build. But he acted as though it was already a completed act. He began with the feeling of having arrived at his ideal for that empty lot. Then I woke on my bed, and I recalled the dream. And I knew that the depths of my own being had constructed that scene to instruct me. Here is one facet of the great use of this power called imagination, which is God. It was too early to rise, so I went back to sleep, and I redreamed the dream. This time, I am the grandfather. I am not the father telling the story. I am not an eavesdropper listening to the story as it was told in the original dream. I am now the grandfather. Then I would say to everyone, by standing on an empty lot, I remember when this was an empty lot. So she reminded him of this technique. Now she said, you are afraid that you might be let out after 27 years and 2 months in Jones and Lachlan. I will now remember when you were afraid. I will remember when you thought it all came to an end. That's one. He said, 2 years ago, I was interviewed, and I thought it a very good interview. But after 2 years, it has never appeared in the trade paper. And I wondered, what have they done with it? Have they simply forgotten it, mislaid it, or deliberately not used it? She said, I will read that magazine, and I'll be lifted up by it. It's humorously written, as you tell me. Well, I will take that book right now in my hand, that magazine, and I will read it, all about you. She went into 2 or 3 others. Then she returns. Now she's here tonight. She said, in December, I received the magazine. It's very well written and very, very humorous, all about this man. Then she said, I heard on the radio that Jones and Lachlan had decided not to close the plant, but instead to spend $13 million on the plant in modernizing. And then beginning January the 1st, to recall over 4,000 workers that they had let out. Now he is walking on air, but like all of these fellows, he will still forget it. He will still turn to a God outside of himself. This to him would have happened anyway. They would have spent the 13 million, brought back the 4,000. That thing that was found after 2 years and printed, oh, that would have happened. And man goes blindly on worshiping a false God because he does not know God. The only God is your own wonderful human imagination. The only name forever and forever that is his name is I am. So that is my name forever. So when you come to the people of Israel and they ask you what is his name, just simply say, I am. That is who I am. And by this name I shall be known throughout all generations. There is no other name. You cannot separate I am from yourself. That's your essential being. And when you say I am, you are all imagination. You cannot stick imagination on the outside and point to it. So you do not observe it as you observe the fruit of imagining. You do not observe imagination as you do objects in space, because you are the reality that is called imagination. This is what we teach here night after night. Now you can test it.
Now, just to say, the Jones and Lachlan Steel Company did, as most of them did eventually close because the economy shifted away. You had, steel in other parts of the world that came in cheaper, big, like, giant global economic shifts. So, eventually that company didn't stay open forever. It eventually closed between like 1968 and 1974. And there was a crisis all over the world. I know in the UK they had the steel plants closed down. In the United States, ended up these big areas of the country between, like, Pittsburgh and Ohio and all of that. It's called the Rust Belt now because all that steel, rusty steel. That's the analogy. So, but at the time that this story took place, they had a little comeback, which I guess saved the day in some careers for some of these people, including the man in the story. So I just wanted to tie that together for you.
What would the feeling be like if it were true that I am now the man that I would like to be? What would the feeling be like? Catch the mood. For the mood determines the fortunes of people rather than the fortunes determine the mood. Man puts it just the opposite. If I had $1 million, he said, oh, I would feel so good. Now, feel as you would if you had it. Catch the mood, and the mood will create that objective hope, if that is your hope. What would the feeling be like if you are now the person you want to be? Well, catch that mood, and wear that mood as you would a suit of clothes. And that mood will actually create an objective state that reflects that mood. That's what she did. She put herself into a mood, actually feeling that she was reading a story of her friend. And here it came. It's a complete spread, 2 full pages, all about this man. And then a little news bulletin on the radio, and then confirmation from him, and a telephone call from his wife confirming the news bulletin, that they're all back on their job, and here now, as he said, for years, after 27 years, I walked through that plant, and I thought I'd go crazy. I wanted to climb the wall because of the noise. When I heard the hammers, and the bellows, and the furnaces, and all these thousands of workmen, that constant din, I wanted to climb the wall. Now, after 4,000 were let out, my footsteps echoed through the entire area. I would like to run and scream, running towards my office. What he does in the plant, I do not know. But if he goes towards his office, undoubtedly he has an executive position in that place, and is not working at the furnaces. But he said, you can't imagine when 4,000 were let out, how empty the place was, and everything simply echoed, and my footsteps seemed like some thunderous thing as I walked through that plant towards my office. And many a moment I wanted to simply jump up and start running. It seemed so empty. She said, all right, that's something. I will remember when. And she applied that technique. When your footsteps scared you and you wanted to run towards the office. Now it's the clacker all over again. So I tell you, I know from my own experience that these moods, you catch a mood, I could tell from the mood that possessed me through the day that I would meet a certain character. And I met that character. It may be someone I knew or some total stranger, but I could tell from the very mood that possessed me that I'm drawing into my world an affinity with that mood. You can catch a mood and create the world that is in harmony with the mood. Anyone can do it. In fact, you're doing it morning, noon, and night anyway. So when you turn to some external God, you are turning to a false God. There is no external God. Examine yourselves, said Paul, to see whether you are holding to your faith. Test yourselves. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? Unless, indeed, you fail to meet the test. You've just had the test. So if you think of some being on the outside, but I use the word Jesus Christ, you have the wrong Jesus Christ. For we are told by him all things were made. And without him was not anything made that is made. Look into the room. All this was once only imagined. The suits you wear, the dresses you wear, the hats you wear, everything here, the building, was once only conceived in the human imagination and then executed. And if all things were made by him, well, then I must come down to find out who he is. Well, I can't go beyond my own imagination. I know exactly what I imagine, and I see the results. So I go back. All things made by him, yes, good, bad, and indifferent. He waits on me just as quickly and just as indifferently when the will in me is evil as when it is good. Is that in Scripture? You'll find it in Scripture. Read it in the book of Deuteronomy. I kill. I make alive. I wound. I heal. And none can deliver out of my hands. I am the Lord. Read it. Read that in the 32nd chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. There is no other God. I am the Lord your God, and besides me there is no other God. I am is that God. As we are told in the 46th Psalm, be still and know that I am God. A man will not believe it, and yet he has evidence morning, noon, and night that his own wonderful creative power, which is his own wonderful human imagination, is producing the phenomena of life. He sees it all around him.